One of the few unfortunate things about living up here in Canada is that our growing season is quite a bit shorter than in other parts of the world. For example, while some of our American neighbors to the south are already busy planting, as of just a few days ago, our garden still looked pretty much like this. In fact, it's likely to remain at least partially under snow cover for at least the rest of March, and our last frost date won't arrive until nearly a couple of months after that. So it's easy for us gardeners in the Great White North to feel a little left out at this time of the year. And even once our soil is finally workable and we can once again start to get our hands dirty, it can still feel like we're just playing a game of catch-up. Now, none of this really has anything to do with today's topic, except to say that we've been intending to make a longer version of this video for the past couple of years. But unfortunately, by the time we're able to actually record ourselves planting in our own garden, many of you are already preparing for your first harvests. So by that point, we usually figure we've already missed the boat and might as well focus on something else instead. However, now that spring has officially sprung, we've once again begun hearing from a number of you, and many are asking the same question. How do we actually plant into a Ruth Stout garden? And more specifically, how do we direct sow our seeds? How do we transplant our seedlings? And how do we plant other veggies like potatoes and garlic? Because we've previously gone into quite a bit of detail about the initial setup, where we get our mulch, and what kinds we've tried. We've also talked about all of the benefits of a Ruth Stout-style deep mulch garden, and even some of its limitations. But when it comes to the actual planting, it would seem that we've only touched on it briefly. So even if it's way too early for us, we felt that it would still be helpful for some of you if we put together a short overview video in the meantime. And then later in the season, we can always post a more in-depth follow-up if necessary. But as you'll see, for the most part, the short answer to this question is same as usual. Just do what you would normally do in a standard tilled garden. But of course, that probably still leaves you with a follow-up question, like, what do we do with the mulch though? And so, in the case of direct sowing, our first step is to pull aside some of the mulch to expose the bare soil underneath. If you're using a row configuration, then separate the mulch into a long furrow. Or if you're using the square foot method, or you're just not that into straight lines, then simply pull apart the mulch in a small patch. But either way, once the soil is exposed, then just follow the depth and spacing instructions on the packet and plant your seeds exactly as you normally would. Now, in some cases, you can get away with sprinkling a light cover of mulch back over top of the seeds. However, in most cases, that is not necessary and is not recommended. But once the plants begin to grow, you can then pull the mulch back in toward the stems. This helps shade the soil, retain moisture, and prevent weeds. But just make sure you don't actually cover any of the leaves. And that's it. From here on out, growing in a deep mulch garden is exactly the same as growing in any other, just hopefully with a bit less maintenance work. Okay, now let's look at transplanting, though it's nearly identical. Once again, our first step will be to expose the soil, either in a row or a patch. And then, you guessed it, just do what you would normally do. Dig a small hole, pop in the seedling, and gently pack it in. But in this case, since the seedlings are already growing, you can immediately pull the mulch back around the stem, while, of course, still being cautious not to cover any of the leaves. And then after that, just continue on like in any other garden. So as you can see, other than pulling the mulch aside as the first step, and then returning it once the plants are big enough as the last step, for the most part, planting into a Ruth Stout garden is no different than in any other. However, as you may recall from some of our other videos, when it comes to veggies like potatoes and garlic, you do have another option if you'd like to try it. So potatoes and garlic are a bit different, mostly because they both produce strong shoots that can easily pierce their way through a surprisingly thick layer of mulch. So unlike the other veggies, these ones can be covered in mulch right after planting, rather than waiting until they grow up a bit. And because of this, if you'd like, you can also skip the usual step of burying the tubers or cloves in soil, and instead simply place them on the soil and then cover them with mulch. This is how Ruth recommended it for potatoes, and from our own experimenting, we've confirmed that it works for garlic as well. In both cases, they'll still send roots down into the soil for water and nutrients, and the stems and foliage will find their way to the surface and behave just like normal. You may notice that the garlic stems grow with a 90-degree bend since the cloves start out on their sides, but from what we can tell, this is mostly just cosmetic. However, since inserting the garlic cloves a few inches into the soil is nearly just as fast and easy as laying them on the surface, that is how we tend to do it. But it's nice to know that they'll still grow fine either way. And in the case of our potatoes, we only ever grow them this way, and never bury them in soil. But for more information about each of those veggies, please see the links in the description, because we've covered both of them quite a bit in the past. And I'll also include a link to our Ruth Stout FAQ video, which talks about other things that you might be curious about, like watering, weeding, hungry critters, and the different types of mulch that you can use. But otherwise, that's it. So I really hope you found this quick video helpful, but if you have any other questions that you'd like us to cover, please let us know in the comments. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, happy planting, and we'll see you soon.